Hello and welcome to the press conference for the menu. I'm your moderator today, Rolling Stone senior editor David Fear. I promise I will keep the food puns to a minimum today. Let me introduce your panel. So we've got director Mike Mylod, we've got Aimee Carrero, we've got John Leguizamo, Judith Light, Chau, Nicholas Hoult, and Anya Taylor-Joy. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of stuff, I want to ask a question of everybody we've got here, because one of the really wonderful things about the menu is you have this incredible mix of tones. You know, it's a broad social satire, or it's a grand guignol horror film, it's a very dry comedy, it's a high tragedy. From the perspective of both the director and the cast, how did you all manage to find the right balance that serves all these sort of different thematic courses?
I'm going to jump in first and play director's privilege. For me, well, first of all, instinctive in reading the script. I think one of the things that drew us all to the project was that lovely mashup of tones that I think, as Anya said, you know, it's quite a small target to hit, but we were all attracted to how specific that was. And then I think for me, it was the few days or the week that we spent doing our version of rehearsals, which was basically to sit together or in smaller groups in a room and just talk about issues that interested us in the script and in our story and about our characters. And in doing so, it was perhaps less about what we were actually saying and more about us all tuning in by osmosis, perhaps unconsciously, to get on the same level. So that I think it's a Sidney Pollack quote about everybody making the same movie, so that by the time we were on set, we all kind of tuned in together, and we continued to do so with the huge benefit of shooting the film almost entirely chronologically.
I'm sorry, did you say you shot the film almost entirely chronologically? How did that affect the performances from everybody?
I mean, I think it helped us immensely because there's a very specific turning point in the film where things do start to get darker, dramatically darker. And up until that point, we'd all been having quite a nice, if odd, dinner party. And then the way that this scene was shot was so visceral. I think it kind of shocked all of us when it happened, and that sort of led us down the new tone of the film, less of the laughs, more of the gasps, really. So I think it really helped us carry that through.
There was also this element, wasn't there, that we talked about in rehearsal. I think I gave you a homework assignment, which is about quite patronizing. Sorry about that. Which is for everybody to go and watch The Exterminating Angel, because there was something in Buñuel's film that I loved, and that was this dawning sense of culpability of the guests. And that was something that we were all really interested in. How could we get our guests to walk into that space so full of entitlement and their flushed egos, and go from that and through the whispers of Chef Slowik, through these various, to be gradually have these layers peeled back, on the vanity gradually stripped back, so that by the end of the film they're figuratively kind of emotionally naked and willing to pay the check for their own demise somewhat.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add also that when you have a script that is so, we were talking about this earlier, which is so fragile and so skeletally created on the surface, but there's all this other stuff that's going on underneath, and there's all this room for creativity and expansion, and that was really how we came to work on it together to create all of those things that you were just talking about, Mark. So there was and also a camaraderie was formed. I mean, we really were with each other all the time, every day, and there was this intimacy that was also created that allowed for all those different tones to take place.
Yeah, it's a really tricky script. I signed on not really being able to picture what the final product would look like, and that was exciting to me because I was curious to see how it would turn out, and I knew that the people involved were great collaborators to take that leap of faith with. I was a huge fan of Succession, and I knew that Mark would be able to take these characters who are unlikable for so many reasons, and somehow weave together a story where you cared about what happened, not necessarily to them, but cared about the situation, and it was just surprising that I felt even some sort of like heartbreak for some of the characters, and that's just a special gift that Mark Mylod has.
Yeah, there was that, and I loved what you just said about the curiosity. It piqued your curiosity, and I think that's what it's going to do for audiences too. They're going to be pulled along on this. There's an enticement within the structure of this film and this filmmaking. And also, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Mark has the best sense of humor in the world. So that made, like, the lightness of all of that. This could have been a really dour experience. And we all connected. And
Not
because Mark
inaccurate.
is you know, his humor is so delicious as well as his talent. So it was like all of that really made a lot of difference.
I loved how willing you all were to jump on board this idea of this kind of Altman-esque way that we worked, where we were all mic'd up the whole time. We were all on set together pretty much every day, and never quite knowing entirely where the camera was going to be some of the times, particularly in those more kind of swooping group scenes. And the way that you all improvised, improvisation, and just keeping those secondary and tertiary layers of the conversation going through the group shots and beyond, you know, our scripted dialogue, that insights that gave us all into extra dimensions of the character. And Aimee and John could probably get the gold medal at their table for just for some of the work you came up with. In fact, one of the biggest laughs that we've had in early screenings with that lovely improv. I don't want to spoil it for the audience, but something to do with you handing in your notice, Aimee, and a bad reference maybe that John's character gave you, which still gets huge laughs in every screening. So as well as those laughs, just the insight that gave us to explore these various entitled characters, but to find their underbelly, to find out, you know, how and why they got there and where their vulnerabilities are specifically.
I think my favorite line that was improvised, I think it was improvised. Aimee, did you improvise the emoji line? Because that had me cracking up when I saw the
Yeah, we had a few. Yeah, the emoji line, and then John had something which you can barely hear in the final edit, but man, it gets me every time. You said something about, oh yeah, I love a frozen ice treat, and he's talking about ice cream, but he calls it like frozen ice treat or something, which to me is just, and I think I even heard it when we were doing ADR. I don't even know if it's in the final whatever, but it's just like a crazy thing you say that you hear in passing.
I was trying to channel privilege because I don't understand that.
Frozen ice treat.
Yeah, I mean, I love the political and social commentary of this film, because I feel like it's tapping into something that's happening, especially in America, maybe across the world as well, is sort of the disappearing middle class and these billionaires who think they can control our democracies, control our social platforms, control us, and how they separate us and keep us out and go into the little special bubbles. I think it's a great commentary on the privilege that's happening in America and entitlement and people creating like a us versus them. And I love them getting their punishment in this flick.
You know, I've got a question for Anya, because all we initially know about your character is that she couldn't care less about this fancy pants food and that she's not supposed to be there. And then we sort of understand that the chef's taken a particular interest in her. And that leads to a lot of wonderful exchanges between you and Ralph Fiennes. Can you talk about working with him on those scenes, the dynamic between the two of you, how to sort of play that, I mean, I guess contempt is the word that you would use for how he feels about those guests?
Oh, I mean, what can I say about Rafe? He's the most phenomenal actor, but the thing that's interesting is he's so talented that whatever he wants to transmute on screen, that will happen. So of course, as an audience member, you will feel this formidable presence and this fear whenever he's there, but maybe it was our characters, maybe it's the way that we both approach acting. All of our scenes together felt so warm and intimate, even when we were being, you know, quite rude to each other when the stakes were pretty high. I always just felt really comfortable with him, and I felt like I had a very generous dance partner and that we were both enjoying that bizarre intimacy. We had a great time together.
Nicholas, there's a journalist here that wants to know if you did a deep dive into the world of food influencers and food obsessives to prepare for this. Did you do a lot of research into Paco Jets?
Nick had a really, really hard time preparing for this movie. Nick, tell them about your preparation.
It was very difficult because I had to eat at nice restaurants and watch lots of food shows. Like Chef's Table. But it was one of those amazing things that the more of like Chef's Table I watched, the more that I was in awe and amazed by these like singular-minded, like dedicated chefs who committed their whole lives to their craft. And then I was like starstruck because Dominique Crenn, who was like the food advisor on the movie and designed the menu, she was on set one day and I was like, I'd seen her episode and I was like, oh my God, it's her.
Yeah.
And I was like asking her how you pronounce French words, and if I got it right, I'd be like, oh, she said I said it right. So I just basically became,
She was the rock star
an
of the
annoying,
set.
like,
Yeah,
little
for
person
sure.
like my character that was just obsessed with that world. So then it makes it very easy to like be in those scenarios with Rafe and Chef Slowick, because I'm like, I am in awe of him and as an actor anyway, so I can just kind of use that as the character.
You know, I think whether you've worked in the hospitality service or you've just eaten at a lot of fancy restaurants, you have inevitably come across a host or a general manager who's sort of a major domo who has this incredibly intimidating, menacing sense of presence, and you do not want to cross him or her. I have never seen that so accurately portrayed as we get with Elsa here. Hong Chau, can you please talk a little bit about finding that right sense of rigid authority to bring to her, and what you were thinking when you whispered to that finance bro, you'll eat less than you desire and more than you deserve.
To bring it back to Dominique Crenn real quick, she was on set serving as our consultant and making sure that everything was accurate and that we were running the set in a way that was true to a restaurant of that caliber. And I was a little bit sheepish about talking to her, but one day she sidled up next to me and she was like, I love what you're doing. I think it's spot on, and I want you to come and work for me. And that was such a huge compliment and seal of approval, one that probably meant more than any compliment Mark could give. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. I would say that there wasn't a lot of information about Elsa on the page, and so that was something that Mark and I talked about a lot prior to filming. I was hoping to, find moments where we could create some sort of intrigue and draw some curiosity and interest from the audience about who Elsa was outside of the restaurant or how she came to be a part of Chef Slowick's crew. And I was filming something in Portland, Oregon at the time, and the restaurant was supposed to be set in the Pacific Northwest. So I was really inspired by a lot of the funky people that I witnessed around me. And I came up with a backstory from that, and I asked Mark if we could have like a really strong visual look for her, and he initially told me no. And I was really stubborn, and I dug my heels in.
Then you enlisted the costume designer and ganged up on me.
Yes. Thankfully, Aimee Westcott, our costume designer, who also happens to be Mark's wife in real life, was very happy to conspire with me against Mark's wishes. And she came up with that really beautiful costume for Elsa. It's black and white and really visually striking, and that just helped me so much in creating the character.
I've got a kind of joint question for John and Aimee here. John, you get to play one of the juiciest roles that any actor can play, which is a movie star who is behaving badly. Were there any folks in particular that you drew from borrowed from to play this person?
Here we go.
He's gonna name names already, baby.
While you're thinking of names to name, Aimee, I'm just wondering, we find out really interestingly that this assistant comes slightly from privilege, but she's still in a subservient role. So I'm just wondering how you found the balance to kind of play those two tones, the same thing. John, you go first.
Yeah, well, I'm not being typecast here, so because I'm not washed up, and I'm not an action star, so I'm not a washed up action star. But I've worked with a lot of action stars who became washed up, and I modeled it after one person in particular who was a bit of an a-hole and a bully. Okay, Steven Seagal. I modeled after Steven Seagal because I did a movie with him, and in rehearsals he knocked me out, and he didn't
Did he
care.
knock you out or did you punch
Knocked me out.
Whoa, rude.
Hit me with a elbow in my solar plexus and knocked me against the wall
no.
because I was laughing at him. I forgot to mention that part, that I was a bit of a dick then. Sorry, I had to give that fact. So that's who I was modeling after. Somebody, you know, I've seen these privileged guys and these guys who come into a room with so much narcissism and self. It's like they suck the oxygen out of the room because they want all the attention and everything's got to be on them. Otherwise, they turn negative. So that's what I was trying to create because it doesn't naturally come to me.
It doesn't. You're very kind.
You kind of said that. Yeah, it does. With
No,
that look.
he is. He
I
pays
see
for
what you're trying
every
to
dinner
do.
we went on. As far as the power dynamic, one of the things I loved so much about the script is that nothing is ever as it seems. When you think something's going to happen, the other thing happens. And I think this is true of some of the other tables too, where the power dynamic should be one thing, but really it's another. So like Felicity is an assistant to a movie star, but her mother runs a major studio. And so her mother has procured her this job and she's sort of play acting this career with the movie star. And it's kind of clear, you know, who kind of runs things kind of. So I feel like, you know, the movie star sort of needs Felicity a little more than Felicity needs the movie star. Of course, you know, it is codependent in a lot of ways, but I think that's what makes this movie so special is that when you think it's going to go one way, it goes another way. You know, there's the food critic played by Janet McTeer and her editor, Paul Edelstein, and it's clear that the editor should have all the power, but really it's a food critic, and he like finishes her sentence, you know, at the end of the sentence, finishes her sentences like that.
Yeah, like that.
So I loved that. I loved exploring that about her, and you know, she's also complicit in all of this too. As Seth Reese, like one of our writers, likes to say, she was born on third base, and that's something that she has a huge advantage over other people.
It's interesting you brought up the changing power dynamics too, because you can definitely see that with the older married couple played by Judith Light and Reed Birney. Which, I mean, first off, two theater legends on the same table, amazing. Yes, definitely clap. And second, I love how that her arc changes, how she really kind of comes in like the lamb and leaves like the lion. Judith, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel very much the same way that you do, and I adore Reed, and we've been friends for a long, long time. That when you watch a woman who has lived her life giving up her soul and herself in order to have the privilege that she so desperately wants, and begins to realize through the course of the film, just like Aimee just said, is that you think it's one way, and it's not that way. It turns into something else, and you begin to see that she wakes up as she realizes that her life is not what she wanted it to be. She's not who she wants to be, and she's not living the way that she wants to live. And so there is this bubbling, this cauldron that's underneath all the time within the dynamic, and where that begins to shift and play out is in relation to Anya's character. So that you begin to see that there's a uniting of these two women in a very simple, I think maybe we say 3 words to each other in the entire film, but you can see the process of what's happening within the heart and soul of this person, and you don't really see it until things begin to unfold in the most powerful, painful kinds of ways. So between the two of us, between Reed and myself, we had a very, I felt a very special and deep kind of rehearsal. You know, Mark was saying in the beginning, we all had these rehearsals with each other, and we improvised something between the two of us that was so moving and poignant and powerful, because you know, you walk into a restaurant and you see those two people. They're not talking to each other. They never talk to each other. And you say to your partner, I'm never going to be that person. I'm never going to be the person in that relationship. And there you are. And one day you wake up and there you are, and you are that person. And so we were discovering all those things all of the time. So Mark really gave us the depth and the breadth within the creativity of those rehearsals and being on the set as well, our reactions to other people that really illuminated, and you begin to see that this character, you see her transformation over time.
Listen, I could talk to you guys about this movie for hours, but I'm being told that I have to drop the check on the table. So thank you all so much for being here and answering these questions. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions. And the movie is out on Friday, November 18th. Go see it.
Friday.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.